if you have a look at this lineup, a police lineup, a typical police lineup, will an individual be able to identify if the culprit is present in this lineup, or would the individual not be able to identify one? When we talk about these lineups, we refer to two different categories here. The first one, I'd like to refer to it as a target present lineup. Now, the word I'm using is target present lineup. What does the word target present lineup over here mean? As I use the word target present lineup, the idea is that out of these five people that you see in front of you, one of them is the culprit who was involved into any act of any criminal act. And if I use the word target absent lineup, what does this word target absent lineup over here mean? As we use the word target absent lineup, the idea is that out of the five people that you see in front of you, there's the culprit is not amongst them. So out of these five people that you have in front of you, none of them is a culprit. And in this case, if an eyewitness to a particular crime scene is made to identify the the eyewitness would be expected to reject and to reject that there's that the culprit is not present in this lineup. So, like I said, we were discussing this research that was conducted by Pozzulo et al. In 2011. The culprit in a target absent lineup, understanding young children's false positive and responding. Now, there are a couple of things that I want you all to have an idea about before we get started. Initially, I mentioned the difference between a target present lineup and a target absent lineup. As I use the word target present lineup, the individual, if the target is present in the uh, lineup, and there are different options that you have there, and if the target is present there, the individual would be expected to identify the culprit. And if the target is not present, the individual would be expected to show rejection and say that the target is not present here. Now, there's another thing that I want you all to keep in mind. For this particular research, the researchers were used both human targets and cartoon targets. There's a reason behind that we discuss in a bit. And number three, the third thing that I want you all to keep in mind, if you have a notebook in front of you, I'd want you to write this down as well. And the third thing that I'd want you all to keep in mind over here, this research would have participants as adults, and this research would comprise of participants who are adults, and this would also comprise of participants who are children. So both children and adults would be used in this research as the participants who would be expected to either identify the culprit or reject the culprit in a particular lineup, right? Remember, you identify when the target is present in the lineup, and you reject when the target is absent in the lineup. So before we get started, as we get started, let's start off with the psychology being investigated. So what is the psychology what is the psychology that is being investigated over here? If you get a 4-mark question on the psychology being investigated, number one, the researchers, they're trying to study false memory here. What does the word false memory mean in this context? A piece of stored information an individual believes to be an accurate memory, but which is the consequence of a later additional or untrue information, such as in a question about an event seen by an eyewitness. So if you remember, I had mentioned the research that was conducted by Loftus and Palmer in our previous lesson. This study was conducted back in the 1970s, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was 1976. I want to double check that. 1974. Yeah, my bad. It was 1974. So this research that was conducted by Loftus and Palmer in 1974, through this research, the authors of this research, or the researchers, they were trying to explain how after an event takes place, if there's any additional incorrect information that you get, there is a likelihood that you might mix it with what you actually witnessed, and this untrue additional information that you received might end up resulting in the creation of a false memory. So a piece of stored information an individual believes to be an accurate memory, but which is the consequence of a later additional and untrue information, such as in a question about an event seen by an eyewitness. So if we speak about this particular research that was conducted by Loftus and Palmer, we have an example here. A classic experiment by Loftus and Palmer used a video of a vehicle that had an accident. The results showed that the words used in a question affected participants' speed estimates. So, what Loftus and Palmer, if I put it in a simple, super simple manner, through this research that was conducted by Loftus and Palmer, what they were trying to explain is when you are describing that particular event, and if you use a word smash, the or if you use the word smash as compared to you using the word hit, the estimate of the car's speed when it had an accident would be different for participants. So, how the adult participants' speed estimates for the vehicle, where you go. The results show that the words used in a question affected participants' speed estimates for the vehicle. The adult participants estimated faster speeds when asked how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other, as compared to when they were asked how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. So the wording over here matters, and this again helps us understand this better, I hope. The witness confidently believes these false memories to be true. For example, even asking the witness a question that contains extra information can distort their recall. Now, two major things that the psychologists are trying to investigate through this research. Two initial major things. Number one, we spoke about false memories, and the second one is eyewitness testimony. That is an evidence provided by an individual who has seen or heard a crime being committed. This information is used by the legal system. Now, if we talk about uh, the legal system in many cases relies on eyewitness testimony. In other words, let's just say a crime took place. The people who witnessed the crime, or one of the individual witnessed the crime, he or she is being called as an eyewitness and is expected to testify. And what if that individual who is expected to testify ends up confusing one thing with another? An additional piece of information that was uh, shared with him, either intentionally or unintentionally later, could mix things up in his head, which would consequently result in you putting someone who is not a culprit into trouble. So, just a basic little idea. So, if you talk about the psychology being investigated here, our memory works like a computer in some ways, but differs in respect to the way that stored data can be accidentally changed or damaged. In excluding events such as crashing or getting a software virus, computers reproduce an error-free copy of a memory. If information has not been deliberately processed, it comes out of storage identical to when it went in. This is not the case for human memory. So we're talking about a comparison between computers and human memory. We may feel humans, us as humans, we may feel as though a recall is perfectly accurate, but cognitive psychologists have shown that memories can be distorted, like the example that I gave you, for example, by other information that we are exposed to during and after encoding. Sometimes these changes don't matter, but when a human memory is a key source of evidence in a criminal trial, they are vitally important. Of course, in a criminal trial, if you're an eyewitness and you're relying on your memory, the system is actually relying on your memory, you can end up uh, identifying the wrong person, or in the case where the target is actually present in the lineup. And what if we talk about a situation where the target is not present in the lineup at all, and that we refer to as a target absent lineup? In a target absent lineup, you end up pointing at someone and identifying at someone which who should not have been identified because of that false memory. So instead of rejecting all the different options that were presented in front of you, you end up identifying someone who was not actually the culprit. So, additional information given after the event seen by an eyewitness called post event information can produce false memories. Now, taking this ahead, one, children as well as adults can be witnesses to crimes. Sometimes a child may be the only person to see a crime. Now, this is a justification, this is an explanation as to why the researchers included children in this research. So, and if you remember the title, even the title had children mentioned. So, understanding young children's false positive responding. False positive responding in this, what does false positive responding over here mean? The child ended up positively responding, saying that, oh, I know this person, but it was incorrect, and it was an incorrect answer. So, taking this ahead, children as well as adults can be witnesses to crimes. Sometimes a child may be the only person to see a crime. So the legal system must rely on their eyewitness testimony. For such evidence to be useful, children need to be reliable witnesses. But are children reliable witnesses? There's a huge question mark there. Now, taking this ahead, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, if we talk about the background of the research real quick, Pozzulo et al. Studied. Joanna Pozzulo is the researcher who's the author to this research paper, who's the one who conducted this research. So Pozzulo et al. Studied child witnesses and recognized that cognitive effects, such as those caused by post events, like the example that I gave you of the study that was conducted by Loftus and Palmer in 1974, as cognitive effects such as those caused by post-event information, including the way questions are asked, can be responsible for errors in decision making by children. So the takeaway over here should be that according to Pozzulo et al., who have been conducting researches on this particular subject matter that have involved children, they figured out, or they understood, that children, when they're presented as witnesses and when they're asked to recognize, when they're expected to rely on their memory, because of certain cognitive effects, which could possibly be because of the post event information that they received, which might not be true, this could end up in children making errors in their decision making. Some of the earlier research conducted by Pozzulo and Lindsay in 1997. Now, this research that is a part of a syllabus, like I said earlier, was conducted in 2011. The piece of information that we just read was from another research that they had conducted in 1997. So they showed that children were less likely than adults to say, I don't know, in response to a question, even when they knew this response was possible. So in this particular paragraph, the latter part of the paragraph over here, we're relying on what we need to understand is, especially in a target absent lineup, एक ऐसा लाइनअप जहां पे टारगेट प्रेजेंट नहीं है, जहां पे आपको एज अ रिसर्चर ये कहना चाहिए, ओ आई डोंट सी द टारगेट हियर, आई डोंट थिंक एनीवन in front of me the one is the actual culprit. Children tend to make more errors as compared to adults, even when in situations where children should say, oh, I do not know, or anything that's not affirmative, they end up making an error, and they end up in pointing at someone and putting that someone into trouble. So one way that witness information is used by the police is the lineup. Now, we also know what a lineup is, where the witness is asked to identify the perpetrator of the crime from a selection of individuals presented to them, whether or not the perpetrator is actually present. So we're talking about a possibility of a target present and a target absent lineup. However, this system can create mistakes and therefore miscarriages of justice. A witness may be more likely to make errors. A witness may be more likely to make errors if they're asked to make a decision from a lineup and are then presented with another lineup containing the same suspect. So that is leading to confusion. Now uh, we're talking about two lineups over here, and if there's a person who is present in a lineup and then you have that person in another lineup as well, this is more likely to confuse the witnesses. So Pozzulo and Lindsay in 1998 found that when the culprit is not among the people in lineup, children are more likely than adults to identify an innocent person. This is called a false positive response. So what does the word of false positive response mean? Giving an affirmative or a positive but incorrect answer to a question. That is when you're saying, oh, this person, but that this person that you're pointing at is not actually who the culprit is. For example, mistakenly picking out a person in a lineup when the real culprit is not there. Now, taking this ahead real quick, moving on. Now, another thing that I'd want you all to keep in mind, you know what? When we speak about uh, when we speak about identification in a lineup, or for the matter of fact, rejection for the third time now you identify in a target present lineup where the target is actually where the culprit is actually present there, and you reject in a target absent lineup where the culprit or the target is not present. So in this recall process, there are certain cognitive as well as social processes involved. Now, when we use the word cognitive processes involved, we're talking about memory recall. We're talking about an individual's ability to be able to recognize, to be able to recall something that they have witnessed, either seen or heard. And at this point, if I use the word social processes, see, it's not only about an individual having to recall from the memory that environment, that situation, that experience of being in a let's just say police station in the presence of an authoritative figure, that in itself might make the witness nervous and uncomfortable. More so if you talk about children, they're more vulnerable. And the likelihood of children getting affected more through the social process is always there, and which could possibly be a reason why children end up giving an affirmative or a positive response despite of the fact that the target is not present, and despite of the fact that children have an option of saying I do not know. So having said that, if we take this a little further, this study focused on social effects. Like I said, for a recall, there is a cognitive process as well as a social process. They both come into play. So this study focused on social effects on child witnesses. Pozzulo et al. Suggested that children may be more likely to make incorrect decisions in a lineup as a result of several different social factors. So the different factors that Pozzulo et al. Put forward, we discussed three of these different factors that Pozzulo et al. Claimed could be responsible for children making errors and uh, children making errors resulting in incorrect decisions. So, what are the social factors here? The different social factors, there are three that we discuss. If a child is asked to select which of the people in the lineup is the culprit, they may think that they need to choose one of the people. Not making a choice, that is, saying the culprit is not there, could be seen as non response from the child's perspective. They may think, if I'm given a selection, I must make a choice. So the child might feel pressurized. The child might feel that if they have been asked to choose an individual, they have to choose one despite the fact that that individual is not present there. So, a child is likely to view the adult who asks them the question as an authority figure, especially if it is a police officer. So, the likelihood that the presence of an authority figure or an authoritative figure might make the child feel more pressurized. Now, when I use the word the child feel more pressurized and nervous, I'm referring to the social factor over here. So, a child is likely to view the adult who asks them the question as an authority figure, especially if it is a police officer. This would make them more likely to comply with the request. And they'd be like, oh, now that I've been asked to choose, I might as well just choose. So, number three, children may feel more pressured to make a choice than adults. They will want to comply with the request and may even fear getting into trouble if they do not choose somebody. So that's another point that should be taken into account. So they fear of getting themselves into trouble. The mere presence of an authority figure and the situation might make them feel pressurized, and the perspective that children might hold about, if I'm given an option, I might as well, I have to choose one, is a few factors that Pozzolo et al. Identified. Now, quickly hopping on to the aim of this research, I'd like to assume by now you all have a bit of an idea about what this research is actually up to. So there are two factors that we're talking about. Number one, social factors. Number two, cognitive factors. There are two type of lineups that we discussed. We've spoken about a target present lineup and we've spoken about a target absent lineup. So social factors may have a greater effect on child witness than an adult. One eyewitness test is identification of a suspect. And what is identification of a suspect? Picking them out from a target present lineup, picking the culprit out from a target present lineup where the culprit is among the faces presented. Another eyewitness test is the ability to correctly reject faces when the culprit is not present, which we're referring to as the target absent lineup. And I think I've mentioned this at least 5 times in the last 20 minutes. Taking this ahead, to explore the effect of social versus cognitive factors on children's performance as eyewitnesses, Pozzolo et al. Needed to minimize any cognitive effects. So we're talking about a comparison. We're talking about Pozzolo et al. Wanting to explore the to explore two different factors. Number one, the social factor or the social process, and another factor that is the cognitive process or the cognitive factors. What they decided was they decided to minimize the cognitive effect. So once you've minimized the cognitive effect, you'd have a better idea of the social effect. दो अलग अलग वेरिएबल्स हैं, एक वेरिएबल को आप मिनिमाइज कर रहे हैं so that you are able to understand the second factor better. And how do you minimize the cognitive process or cognitive factors? If I may give you a quick little example here, you know what? If I ask you to yeah, if I ask you to read out the 26 alphabets in English, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, goes all the way till Z. This is, I believe, not a task that would be cognitively very demanding for you. Cognitively very demanding for you because we all know what those 26 alphabets are. So you don't have to think, and recall. You probably have it at the back of your mind, and you'd simply be like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, going all the way till Z. Now, in this case, and because of this, what the researchers, that is Pozzulo et al., they decided to do was they considered using cartoons, familiar cartoons, cartoon faces or popular familiar cartoon faces. If used, if familiar popular cartoon faces are used, that in other words means the participants in this research, they wouldn't really have to work a lot on their cognitions. And this would perhaps give the researchers a better idea about the social factors that are involved in this identification and rejection processes. So, taking this ahead, to explore the effect of social versus cognitive factors on children's performance as eyewitness, Pozzulo et al. Needed to minimize any cognitive effects that could impair the children's decision making, minimizing any cognitive effect. And how did they consider minimizing this? They considered minimizing this by using cartoons. I'll give you a quick little example. If I show you this, you all know who this cartoon character is. This is Dora the Explorer. We all know. And this task is in itself a very cognitively, this task is cognitively uh, less demanding as compared to you having to identify a human face, right? And why is it cognitively less demanding? Because of familiarity. You all know who this cartoon character is. So is the case with this cartoon character, Diago, also known as Go Diago Go. So the researchers, what they chose to do was they chose to use cartoon characters with the idea, the intention that this would help minimize the cognitive process or the cognitive effect. So where were we? They did this by comparing identification and rejection of a cartoon character. As cartoon characters are familiar, a child should identify them with the same accuracy as adults, approximately 100%. This is because it is a cognitively easy task. It only requires matching an existing memory to the faces they can see in the lineup. However, in a target absent task, matching is not possible. So a selection must be made. Faced with a harder task, children should rely more heavily on social factors and make more errors than adults. Now, I hope you've understood this. Now, the aims were to test the following predictions. The author of this book, Julia Russell's, refers to this as an aim. I think they should be better referred to as, I think, their hypothesis. The aim was here. Aim gives you a basic idea as to what the researchers are up to. Hypotheses are predictable statements, and these very clearly are predictions. She's mentioned it over here as well. Now, there are four different hypotheses, and we use the word hypotheses when there are multiple hypotheses, that is plural. And there are four different hypotheses that the researchers would want to test. And we would refer to these hypotheses as directional hypotheses. Why the word directional hypothesis? Because they are predicting an outcome out of these research. And what exactly are they? If you see, I've turned this into almost a rainbow. This is very colorful. What needs to be kept in mind is, number one, we're talking about a comparison of children and adults. I repeat, we're talking about a comparison of children with adults. We're comparing children with adults. Number one, okay, a few things, a few hacks here. So children, we're only seeing them being as good as adults once, and thrice we're seeing children being worse than adults. So good once, thrice worse. This will help you learn better. Number two, like I've been saying, as we use the word identify, we are referring to a target present lineup, and we use the word reject, we're referring to a target absent lineup. Second hack. Number three, children will be good at as children will be as good as adults at identifying cartoon faces only through a target present lineup. And that's it. In other words, बच्चे adults jitne अच्छे हो, I mean, children would be as good as adults when they are made to identify cartoon faces. I repeat, cartoon faces in a target present lineup. And the rest three cases, children would be worse than adults. This is a prediction. These are the four different hypotheses here for this particular research. So taking this ahead, children will be worse than adults at identifying human faces in a target present lineup. Target present lineup, that is, the target is there, but the target is a human. We're talking about a comparison. We're talking about human faces that need identification. And according to the second hypothesis, children will be worse than adults. Now, the third hypothesis, children will be worse than adults again, rejecting cartoon faces. So for both the rejecting options, children will be worse than adults. And for the identification options, children will be only good when it comes to identifying cartoon faces. And but yeah, children will be only good, as good as adults when they made to identify cartoon faces, and they would not be good as adults, or children would be worst when they made to identify human faces. तो चार हमारे पास यहाँ पे hypothesis है. Third hypothesis क्या है? Children will be worse than adults at rejecting cartoon faces in a target absent lineup. Number four, children will be worse than adults at rejecting human faces at a target present lineup. Now, I hope you've understood this real quick. Let's take this ahead. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now, the method of research here. This was a laboratory experiment. Of course, as we refer to this as a laboratory experiment, this research was conducted in a controlled environment. One, the identification of the culprit, we'd be referring to the culprit as a target here, was done through a 13-inch laptop. Written somewhere. Here, through a 13-inch laptop. And this was done in a controlled environment, and of course, not a police station. So if we speak about the research method and design for this particular research, this study was a laboratory experiment. When I use the word laboratory experiment, see, if it's an experiment, there is an IV and there's a DV. That's given. And if I call this a laboratory experiment, that means this study was conducted in an artificial environment. And if this study was conducted in an artificial environment, your controls would be higher. Higher controls means better standardization of procedure, which increases the chances of replicability. That is, you being able to repeat your research in exactly the same manner, which again increases chances of reliability. That is, you having consistent results. This study was a laboratory experiment. Participants were in a laboratory, whereas real lineups would take place somewhere official, such as a police station. Understandable enough. So there were three independent variables that we're talking about here. The first one is the independent variable in terms of age. The second one is in terms of the lineup type. And the third one is in terms of the level of cognitive demand. As I use age as an independent variable over here, remember when I said we're talking about a comparison between adults and young children. And this would be an independent measures design. Why is it that I'm referring to this as an independent measures design? I'm referring to this as an independent measures design because you as a participant would either be a child or you'd be an adult. You can't be both. Number two, the second IV over here is a lineup type. What does the word lineup type over here mean? As I use the word lineup type, we're talking about a comparison between, or we're talking about an individual's capability of being able to either identify, and of course, as I talk about identification, we're talking about a target present lineup. and an individual's ability to reject. And as I use the word reject, I'm referring to a target absent lineup. So the lineup types, there were two different types of lineups: target present, target absent. Now, why is it that I've written repeated measures design over here? Because all the individuals, all of these participants, they were made to go through both of the lineup types. So each child went through the target present lineup as well as the target absent lineup. And each adult went through the target present lineup and the target absent lineup. Number three, the level of cognitive demand. Like I'd mentioned, if you're familiar with the target phase, that means you'd require low, your cognitive demand would be low. And if you're not familiar with the target phase, that is in the case of humans, that means this would be a high cognitive demanding task. So, in a nutshell, what I've explained over here is this. One, we spoke about a target present versus target absent lineup. Number two, we're talking about a comparison of adults with children. Number three, like I said, each child would go through this condition, this, and this, and each adult would go through this, and this, which again makes it a repeated measures design. What is a repeated measures design here? When all the participants go through all the experimental conditions, taking this ahead. So level of cognitive demand, this was a repeated measures design as well. What does that mean here? When we talk about the level of cognitive demand being a repeated measures design, that in other words means each child went through human faces and cartoon faces, and each adult went through human faces and cartoon faces both. Having said that, let's quickly read through this. For the comparison between children and adults, the experimental design was an independent measures design, like I said. For the comparison of lineup type, target present versus target absent, and familiarity of task, target, that is cartoon versus humans, the experimental design was repeated measures design. To test identification recognition, participants were presented with the photo array of black and white. Understand this, learn this, start learning, okay? The participants were presented with a photo array of black and white photographs of close cropped faces for cartoons. Cartoons ka faces jo the wo close cropped the, like zoom. And head and shoulder, of course, between the head and shoulder comes the neck, and head and shoulder images for a human. So for a human, it was head, neck, and shoulders, the upper part of the shoulder. And for the cartoon, the focus was only on the close cropped face, and the photo array was black and white. The dependent variable was whether the participants identified the correct face if presented, or they pointed at the, or they opted for the empty silhouette. Now, this empty silhouette over here is a representation of rejecting, right? Remember, target absent lineup, you have to reject. So, and what does a silhouette look like? I would have to Google it. So just Google it. An empty, I mean, uh, a little sketch that doesn't really show a face, just showing that it's none of the above. So yeah, the test identification recognition, participants were presented with a photo array of black and white photographs of close cropped faces for the cartoons and head and shoulder images for the humans. The dependent variable was whether the participants identified the correct face if present, or the empty silhouette if not. The children's responses were given by pointing at the 13-inch laptop screen. This was recorded by the experimenter, and the adult participants recorded their response sheet on their own. They did it themselves. Now, taking this ahead real quick, let's talk about the sample of this research. As we speak about the sample of the research, let's divide the sample into two groups real quick. On one end, we'd speak about children, and on another end, we'd speak about adults. As we speak about children over here, a few characteristics that you see marked in purple. So how many children were there? There were 59 children who participated in this research. What was their age range? Their age range was 4 to 7 years. What was their mean age? Their mean age was 4.9 years, which again, you can round off and write around 5 years if you get a question in the CIs, which you have had. I believe it was last year or it was this year, but you have had a question on this. So there were 21 females and 38 males, and we're talking about children here. They were recruited from, where were they recruited from? They were recruited from pre-kindergarten or kindergarten classes in 3 private schools in Eastern Ontario, Canada. Now, let's hop on to the adults here. A few characteristics that you need to know about adults as well. So listen, this could be, a potential possible 4-mark question. And what we've seen is at times what the examiner does is the examiner would just mention two of the characteristics, and they'd be like, identify three others. So yeah, learn at least five of these characteristics wherever you have them. So over here you see at least seven for both. Now, there were 53 adult participants, age ranged from 17 to 30 years, with a mean age of 20.5 years, rounded off to 21 years if required, 36 females, 17 males. They were recruited from the introductory psychology participant pool at Eastern Ontario University, Canada. Taking this ahead, information was provided by the adults. Now, see, like I said, I very confidently said, oh, I showed you Dora's face, this character's face. I was like, I'm sure you know who Dora is. And and then I was like, I'm sure you know who this character is. And this is Diago, also known as Go Diago Go. And for the sake of clarity and conformity, the researchers, what they did was information was provided by the adults and by the children's parents or guardians to ensure that all participants were familiar with the uh, two target cartoons in the study. And the two target cartoons in the study were Dora the Explorer, number two, Diago Go, and you have had questions. There has been a 1 mark question where you've been asked to identify the cartoon character. So you need to know this as well. Taking this ahead, moving on to the procedure of this research real quick. To conduct the experiment, the researchers prepared video clips and lineup photograph arrays. So there were videos and there were photograph arrays both. The human face. So essentially what happened was children view the clip and then they get to either identify or reject through the photograph array, lineup photograph array. So human face targets were two Caucasian students. Two Caucasian students. They were used to make two type of stimulus material. Pehla, the video. Now, for the video, okay, if you have a book, if you own a physical copy of the book, and you have some basic stationery, you might as well do this, get busy with this annotation, because this is going to be really helpful when it comes to you. Now, so currently I'm trying to explain this to you and we're short on time, and I'm trying to be as quick as I possibly can. But when it comes to the learning process, if you have these annotations there, if you have these markings there, the likelihood of you skipping something is reduces, and it would get easier for you when it comes to this learning process. And about CIs, they can literally ask anything. So for the videos, a 6-second video was filmed. A 6-second video was filmed of an everyday task. A female brushing her hair and male putting his coat on. Each video was in color with no sound and showed 2 to 3 seconds of the individual task. We are talking about human face targets. Human face targets there were two Caucasians, one male and one female. So a 6-second clip was filmed of an everyday task, a female brushing her hair and the male putting his coat on. Each video was in color with no sound and showed 2 to 3 seconds of the individual's face. And for the photo array, the two human targets, okay, we talked about humans over here, and this responsibility was on these two Caucasian students who were the actors here. So for the photo arrays, the two human targets, that is the students, were photographed wearing different clothes than in the video. So different clothes in the video, and in the photo array, there were different clothes. Understand this. For each target, 4 foil photographs were chosen by 3 raters to look similar to the target in terms of facial feature, hair length, and color. All photographs were cropped to include only face, neck, and top of the shoulders, like I mentioned. Now let's hop on to the cartoon face targets, that is Dora and Diago. Cartoon face targets were two cartoon characters. The two types of stimulus over here were, number one, for the videos, the two 6-second clips were Dora the Explorer talking to the audience and Go Diago Go putting on a pair of gloves for safety. Mark this. Please, if you have your book on you, mark this. As you mark this, it gets easier for you when it comes to learning, and the chances of you skipping something intentionally or otherwise reduces. Each video was in color with no sound or other characters and showed 2 to 3 seconds of the target cartoon character's face. And for the photo array, there were still images of the two cartoon targets. They were used in addition to 4 foils selected from cartoons, images from the internet. Three raters judged the similarity of approximately 10 cartoons for each target. The four most similar ones in terms of facial features, hair length, and color were chosen. All photographs were cropped to include only the character's face, as they tended to wear similar clothing in all episodes, so this could not affect the familiarity of the appearance of the character. Now, this shows the amount of control the researchers had. We've just quickly read what the procedure was uh, when it came to selection of what needs to be there in the video and the photo array of human faces and cartoon faces both. Now, hopping on, continuing with the procedure, the target present lineups contained the target and 3 foils. Now, let me clarify this for the sake of clarity. Each photo array had 5 pictures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Now, and I'm referring to an empty silhouette as a picture here, okay? So 5, each silhouette has 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In a target present silhouette, in a target present lineup, there was an empty silhouette. An empty silhouette would be there in all the conditions. In a target present lineup, there would be one empty silhouette, one target present, and the rest 3 would be foils. Okay. However, if you talk about a target absent lineup, one empty silhouette, like I said, would always be there, and all 4 of the pictures, they would not be the correct faces, and hence we're referring to them as foils here. So the target present lineup contained the target and 3 foils. Target absent lineup contained 4 foils. Every lineup contained a blank silhouette to enable a choice to be made, even if the participant judged that the target was not present. So you point at the empty silhouette if you're rejecting. For children point, and the adults, they give the responses themselves. So the lineup was shown to participants as a simultaneous array, which means that the target, if present, all the foils and the blank silhouette were all shown at once. The position of each target in the lineup was randomized, but for the equivalent target absent lineup, the 4th foil was located in the same position as the original target. All the photographs were in black and white, which was important as the bright colors of the cartoon characters could have become the focus of recognition. You know, colors make a difference. Colors help you recognize better, and that is the reason why these photo arrays, they were black and white, or they contained pictures that were black and white. So bright colors of the cartoon characters could have become the focus of recognition rather than the identity of the character. Each participant watched 4 videos. Learn this. One each for conditions of cartoon target present, human target present, cartoon target absent, and human target absent. I'll read that again. Each participant, I'd rather highlight that. Each participant watched 4 videos, one each for the conditions of the first condition, a cartoon target present, number 2, human target present, number 3, cartoon target absent, number 4, human target absent. These videos were presented in a random order, each being followed by a lineup task. So you watch a video, you're shown a lineup task. You watch a video, and that's how it goes. In each of the 4 lineup tasks, the position of the target or its matching foil were counterbalanced. Research methods coming into play. Videos and photo errors were presented on a 13-inch laptop. Now, do you see the almost endless and sort of countless amount of possibilities where the examiner can actually question you on? See, this research is not difficult. I wouldn't really refer to this research as difficult, but the amount of possibilities, the amount of different options that the examiner has to question you on this, they're enormous. So yeah, and despite of having slides on this, I've shown you the slides earlier in another lesson, the previous lesson, if I'm not mistaken. I'm still doing it from the book just to make you feel more confident. If you have the book, and if you read the book the way it should be read, you're not missing out on anything in the examination, inshallah. Now, each child participants, parents or guardians, and the adult participants were given a written consent. So that's a good thing. Ethical guidelines being taken care of. For children, it was the parent or guardian who did this, and for the adult participants, they did it themselves. A written consent form to complete. The adult participants attended the laboratory. So they attended the place where this experiment took place, and they were given a brief, which is again deception. They were given a brief saying that it was a study about memory. No, it was not a study on memory, only on memory. So that's deceiving them. To test the children, three female experiments. And when it came to, so the adults, they attended the laboratory, or they went all the way to the laboratory, wherever it was. We know where it was. Uh, Eastern Ontario University, Canada. And for the children, the researchers, that is three female experimenters, they went to the child's school, the children's school. There were three private schools, remember we spoke about. So to test the children, three female experimenters went to the children's school. They briefed the children saying that they were researchers from the university doing a project on TV shows and computer games. It was also made clear to the children, where did it go? So this is a lie, and so is this. They briefed the children saying that they were researchers from the university doing a project on TV shows and computer games. This is again a lie. This is deception. The ethical guideline, the word we use over here is deception. The word that actually gets you marks in the CIs is deception. It was also made clear to the children that they could change their minds about whether they want to join in or would not get into trouble. So you're catering to some ethical guidelines over here. You took consent. You're giving children an option that at any given point, if they feel like they don't want to be a part of this anymore, they can simply walk out without any repercussions or a negative outcome. And see, you're reassuring the children that they would not get into trouble, and you're trying to make the children comfortable too. How did the female experimenters do this? The experimenters did some craft work with them prior to starting the experiment. So yes, ethical guidelines are taken care of, written consent and all of this. However, there was deception which was there as well. So for each participant, the following sequence was used. What was the sequence now? The three female experimenters were neatly dressed, wearing professional casual clothing. For example, a sweater or blouse and smart trousers, that is dress pants. This was not overly formal because this could influence the children's responses to the lineups. Remember, social factors. The mere presence of an authority figure could make you nervous, could make you feel pressurized, and could make children feel more pressurized as compared to adults. So this was not overly formal because this could influence the children's response to the lineups through social pressure, for example, by suggesting authority. So this again is a reflection of the amount of controls that the researchers have, which could again add on to the internal validity of the research, because you're keeping all of this standardized. And if it's standardized, like I said, replication gets easier. So see, for each participant, the following sequence was used. Taking it ahead, child and adult participants were tested individually and were asked to pay attention because they would be asked some questions and shown some pictures after watching the video. Following each video, participants were asked a free recall filler question. Why do we use filler questions? What is a filler question to begin with? A filler question is an irrelevant question that is included in a research with the intention that the participants do not figure out the true aim of the study. And why is it that you don't want the participants to figure out the true aim of the study? Because you believe if they figure out what the true aim of the study is, they might end up changing their behavior. They might end up altering their behavior. And if they're altering their behavior, they're messing up with your research. So yeah, a filler question. Following each video, participants were asked a free filler question, that is, what did the cartoon character or person look like? For child participants, a non-specific probing question, that was, do you remember anything else, was then asked. If the child did not respond to the initial question, the experimenter asked, do you remember anything from the video? The children's replies were recorded by the researchers. This is when you talk about what the children went through. And if you speak about the adult here, for adults, the initial question was followed by, do you remember anything else about the cartoon character or the person? The adults recorded their own responses by writing them down. Understand this. Learn the procedure. Learn the procedure in a sequence. If you have a notebook on you, you might as well write this down. If you write it, you learn it better. Can you get a question on this? Of course, you can get a question on this. For each filler task, child participants were told, please look at the photos. The person or the cartoon may be or may not be here. If you see the person or cartoon, please point to the photo. If you do not see the person or the cartoon, please point to this box indicating the blank silhouette. Similar instructions were given to the adults, but they indicated their responses on a matching sheet. The procedure was repeated so that all four videos had been seen and responded. The procedure was repeated so that all four videos had been seen and responded to with the lineup task. The dependent variable was whether the participants identified the correct face if present or the LMT silhouette if they did not. So this was a quick explanation to the procedure. We have the results here, but I think I need a 2-minute break. I would just want to grab myself some water, drink, and come back. Allow me a 2-minute. All right, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let's start off with the results here. Now, to give you a basic little idea on results initially, now see, whenever, for whatever study, whenever you're about to read results, go back and go through the hypothesis. If you have the hypothesis in your mind when you're going through the results, it would give you a better understanding and you'd actually be in a position to figure out if the hypotheses that were there, if they were directional hypothesis, also referred to as one-tailed hypothesis, did the prediction actually turn out to be true or not? So these were the 4 different hypotheses. I hope you've all read them real quick because they're so colorful anyway. Now, the researchers wanted to investigate 2 key differences. The first was the difference between children and adults' identification and rejection accuracy. In other words, the researchers wanted to figure out if children, they wanted to make a comparison here. They wanted to figure out the difference between the rate of accuracy when it comes to rejection as well as identification. A comparison between children and adults. I'll say that in Urdu. Researchers कंपेयर करना चाहते थे कि बच्चों का और adults का identification और rejection, sorry, identification or rejection accuracy कितनी ज़्यादा है. The first thing. The second thing, the second was the difference in children's identification and rejection accuracy between cartoon characters and humans. So if you have a closer look, the second thing that the researchers wanted to investigate focuses only on children. The second was the difference in children's identification and rejection accuracy between cartoon characters and humans. Taking this ahead, adults were better than children at most tasks, and that responses to cartoons were generally more accurate than human targets. Let me explain the results to you first. Let's look at this. So, for better understanding, and this is the book, I'm literally using the book, and I mean, you have to skip through the pages to figure out what page number it is, but yeah, this is the book. Now, having a look at this, just we have light purple and we have dark purple. That's how I'd like referring to them, as a shade of lavender maybe, but let's keep it simple. A lighter shade of purple and a darker shade of purple. And the lighter shade of purple shows child participants, the darker shade of purple shows adult participants. Let's start with the first hypothesis, that is, children would be as good as adults when it comes to identifying cartoons through a target present lineup. For the 9,999th time, whenever you're using the word identification, you're referring to a target present lineup. And if we have a closer look, we see that yes, children were not only as good as adults, but they were slightly better than as adults. Look at this. Children, lighter shade. And this is almost 100% accuracy is touching 1 here. Whereas for adults, it's a little lesser. Yes, there's a difference, but the difference isn't very significant. The first hypothesis down, proven. Number 2, the second hypothesis, children would be worse than adults when it comes to identifying human targets or human faces in a target present lineup. And yes, this is very, very clearly evident. We see the darker shade of purple. I might as well, I just use another color for the next one. So if we see the difference over here is quite a significant difference. It's more than double for what I see from here, almost triple. So we are talking about, and the second, what do you call it? The second hypothesis or the second prediction turns out to be true as well. For the third one now, I'll just remove this. Children would be worse than adults when it comes to rejecting cartoon faces in a target absent lineup. And yes, the difference is there. Not as significant as the second hypothesis, nonetheless, the difference is there. This difference is more than the initial difference we had. And the fourth hypothesis, children would be worse than adults in rejecting human faces in a target absent lineup. And again, there's a significant difference. A significant difference here, a significant difference here, a more significant difference here, and a not so significant difference here, where the children are a little better than adults. So if you understand this, you understood the results. Done, dusted. Now, if you have a look at the lower part of this page, you see a lot of numbers, and I've seen students find this very challenging. I wouldn't officially say do not learn any of this, but yeah, if you're someone who finds learning numbers different, and that too so many numbers, you make your choice. How likely is it that you get a question on this? Not very likely. Can we get a question on this? Yes, we can get a question on this. Based on the past questions that we've had, if you've had a 3-mark question on results and the examiner has specified that you need to mention data, out of a 3-mark question, 1 mark is usually allotted to the data. Data as in the quantitative data. I've told you what happens. Make your choice accordingly. Now, taking this ahead, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Getting back to this, here you can see adults were better than children at most tasks, and that responses to cartoons were generally more accurate than responses to human targets. However, there was little difference between the responses of children and adults in the target present for cartoons. Taking this ahead, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Now, results and conclusions for Pozzulo. Now, what's the difference between result and conclusion? I keep on saying this, and I've seen examiners mentioning this, the principal examiner mentioning this in the marking scheme as well. Children tend to confuse aims with hypothesis and results with conclusions. See, results are the findings from a research. Results are more specific. Conclusion is your takeaway or your understanding, or as the word suggests, what you've concluded from the results. The results specific होते हैं, conclusions इतने specific नहीं होते. Conclusion वो, what's the Urdu word for it? वो lubbo labab from the results. We refer to them as conclusions. So there were 4 different hypotheses. Let's have a look at them real quick. The children versus adults comparison in terms of cartoons. Children have similar accuracy as adults for identifying cartoon faces. Hypothesis number 1. Did the prediction turn out to be true? Oh, yes, it did. The second hypothesis, a comparison between children versus adults in terms of human targets. Children significantly less accurate than adults when identifying human faces. This is hypothesis number 2. Did it turn out to be true? Yes, it did. Target absent. Now, over here, we talk about target present identifications. Now, if you talk about target absent identifications, children versus adults in terms of cartoons, children were significantly less accurate than adults when rejecting cartoon faces. This is hypothesis number 3, and this turned out to be true as well. Children were significantly less accurate than adults when rejecting human faces. This is hypothesis number 4, and this again turned out to be true. Now, moving on real quick, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. If we conclude this research, as predicted, the children could easily find the correct face in the target present lineup, with cartoons identifying with almost 100% accuracy. That ceiling effect, I just showed it to you. In this task, Pozzulo et al. Concluded, therefore, that any error in the target absent lineup for cartoons must be a result of social factors rather than cognitive factors. Why are they so confident? They're confident because they minimize the effect of cognitive factors or the cognitive process, and they did so by using familiar faces. What were the familiar faces here? Cartoon characters, popular familiar cartoon characters. This is because it cannot be explained by a faulty memory for the faces of the cartoon character. The most likely social factor affecting a low correct rejection rate by children is children's expectation that they should make a selection. So this is what they're drawing. This is the conclusion the researchers are drawing, that the most likely social factor that affects a low correct rejection rate by children is the expectation. Children, they feel compelled, they need to make a choice, they feel pressurized. And that is, of course, an example of a social factor, that they should make a selection rather than a non-selection. In its essence, to correctly say that the target character is absent from the lineups. Furthermore, this suggests that differences seen between children and adults in the rejection rate for human faces, which resembles that for cartoon faces, can also be explained by the effect of social demands. Finally, these effects of cognitive versus social demands are relative, not absolute. That means both the task, that is identification task, and rejection task, will be affected to an extent by both cognitive and social factors. The suggestion from the results is only that for children, social factors play a larger part in decision making in target absent lineups than in target present lineups. लुबो ये है कि target absent lineups के अंदर social factors ज्यादा matter करते हैं as compared to target present lineups. So this officially brings this research to a quick end, and I hope this was helpful. We'd keep the past papers and the evaluations for another lesson.